All set.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine McGarry, Mayor of Cambridge and Chair of today's Special Council meeting. I'd like to take some time to address some very welcome news from the province yesterday. The government is looking to expand Ontario's Greenbelt, and specifically, the expansion would encompass the important Paris Galt moraine, which is essential for source protection of our groundwater. It's critical in the sustainability of our city, our region, and our province. And I encourage all of my colleagues and those of you that are watching to engage with the consultations now being done on the environmental registry that's available on the ontario.ca website. We want to grow our density and increase affordability all around, but we must do so with the environment in mind. Growing the Greenbelt is certainly one step in the right direction. And I was delighted to speak with Minister Steve Clark in person on the phone about this important announcement. So let's get started with today's proceedings. As a reminder to members of council and to all of our delegations, in the spirit of kindness and procedural rules, I'll ask that we maintain decorum at all times throughout our meeting and remind members that using disrespectful language will not be tolerated. I'd also like to remind everyone participating in the meeting today to please silence any devices that you may have with you and that you mute your mics when not speaking. I'll now ask our clerk to complete a roll call of council so that we can confirm everyone's attendance as we're coming to you electronically today. Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adshade.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Mehta.
Present.
Councillor Hamilton.
Present.
Councillor Liggett. Oh, we're having trouble hearing you. You want to try that again?
Present.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mann.
Present.
Councillor Reid. Present. Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Mayor McGarry.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. In addition, we're going to take a moment to welcome the staff that we have joining us today. And joining us electronically, we have our city manager, David Calder, our deputy city managers, Hardy Bromberg, Cheryl Zonleiter, Yogesh Shah, and Dave Bush. Our chief financial officer, Cheryl Ayers, our city solicitor, Lisa Shields, our director of recreation and culture, Leslie Head, our director of engineering, Kevin De Liebeck, and as well, we have many staff joining us today from other divisions, and we thank you all for being with us today. Clerking the meeting, we have our city clerk, Danielle Manton, our deputy city clerk, Jennifer Shaw, and our council committee services coordinator, Briar Allison. Thanks again to our technology services staff, Greg Elgie, who is assisting with logistics for today's meeting. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the land traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people that we share this land today. A reminder to members of council that if you've made declarations of pecuniary interest at a previous meeting, you will have to also do so for the bylaw related to that same item today. So members of council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? And seeing none, we'll move forward with our agenda today. As this is a virtual meeting, I'll ask that each member of council who wishes to speak to press your raise hand feature on your video call, and the clerk and I will track the speakers list today and invite you to speak when it's your turn. I'd also like to remind everybody that as a result of physical distancing guidelines being in place, in-person public attendance at special meetings of council is not currently available. However, the procedures for electronic participation during the course of an emergency allow for the public to provide written submissions to the City Clerk's office in advance of the meetings for items on the agenda, and to also call in via telephone to our virtual meeting. This afternoon, we do have 3 registered delegations joining us, as well as a presentation from the architect. So our agenda today is dedicated to one item, and that's 21-038 CD, Recreation Complex, Joint Use Campus. And as I mentioned, we do have a delegation registered today. We also have a presentation from Maureen O'Shaughnessy, Principal with CS&P Architects, Inc. We will invite staff to provide introductions first, and then hear from Maureen O'Shaughnessy, followed by our delegations this evening. So to begin with, I will invite our Director of Recreation and Culture, Leslie Head, is that who's first providing the introductions, as well as an overview of Recreation Complex Joint Use Campus report for us. And I'll ask that council hold questions for staff until we hear from the staff, architect, and then our delegations this evening. And I'll remind you of that as we go along. So thank you, Leslie, for being with us this evening, and please begin.
Thank you, Mayor McGarry. So good evening, Mayor McGarry and members of council. It has been almost 7 years since the City of Cambridge first completed a recreational facilities master plan that recommended the establishment of a large-scale multi-purpose sport and recreation facility to meet both current and future needs of our community. Through the development of 2 council-approved task forces, the decision on location and concepts were further determined. Further to that, council then approved a multi-phase plan for recreation facility improvement across the city. Today, staff are excited to be bringing forward what has been the culmination of several months worth of work, resulting in the feasibility study you see before you. Working closely with our project partners, which included the public and Catholic school boards and the Idea Exchange, our objective was to utilize a strategic and collaborative approach to determine the feasibility of a joint use campus. This project has been a true community investment from the start. Community involvement has been key, and opportunities for engagement have been critical in getting us where we are today, and will continue to be as important, if not more, as the project continues. It is important to note that costs identified are representative of today's dollar, and our unknown variables as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic are still a consideration. However, we are confident in our cost estimates provided to date, and our commitment to our project schedule remains on target for a 2025 opening. As council is aware, we continue to have ongoing discussions around the future of new ice facility in our community. As part of the feasibility study process, we did evaluate the suitability of the ice at the site of the rec complex, and further information relating to this will be brought to council at a later date. The approval of the concept we are sharing with you today is the next key milestone in the path of bringing this exciting project to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. So we'll now move forward and welcome Maureen O'Shaughnessy from CS&P Architect, Inc. And I understand, Maureen, that you do have a presentation this evening. We'll just have our clerk share her screen, and if you could please just ask when the slide should be forwarded. When you're ready, we'll ensure that that happens for you. So again, thank you and welcome this evening, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Go ahead, Maureen.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor McGarry and members of council. We're pretty excited actually to present the feasibility study to you this evening. And I'd like to start actually, and you can go ahead and go to the agenda, please. Start by just talking about the process that we went through to come to the recommendations and to put together the feasibility study, and the really amazing steering committee that we worked with. We've worked on a lot of joint use projects, and the success of a joint use project, in our view, is the enthusiasm and willingness of all of the partners to actually want to be together. And this is a project where all the partners are very much committed to a community hub and the best way to possibly get there. So that kind of enthusiasm really informed the process going forward. So the presentation will kind of follow the order of what you see in the feasibility study in front of you. We'll talk about the vision and guiding principles, a little bit about the site, although the site was already selected before we were brought on board, but we'll talk about that a little bit. A program and needs analysis. We'll move into the concept plans, the analysis of those plans and the conclusions that we drew, and what the next steps might look like going forward. So go ahead to the next slide, please. So the vision. The way we started the process was to have all the partners sit down and talk to us about what was important. What was your vision? What was your mission? What was going to guide you moving forward? And so most importantly, a multi-generational community hub for the residents of Cambridge, kind of one-stop access to education, recreation, culture, all in one place in South Cambridge. Provides a unique opportunity for all the partners to get more than what they would get if they were a standalone facility. And that was important to all the partners. And you have to maximize your investment. So for each partner's investment, you need to get more benefits, get more building, get more sharing. And so all of those things were informing the vision for this joint use campus. If we can move to the guiding principles. So if you've looked at your study, you'll see the guiding principles, and they're very nicely wordsmithed. But what's really important is the kind of key words that kept showing up from all the partners as we spoke about what was important to them. And so you can see this in this little bit of word art. It's about community. It's about sharing. It's about looking for potential. It's about making connections. And the word green shows up in the middle of this. And green means a lot of things, I think, related to this particular project and this particular site. I don't know if you've been to see the site. It's a really fantastic site, and there are really amazing green connections with the Moffat Creek bordering a portion of the site. There's an opportunity for fantastic green open space that's shared by the community, shared by the schools, and a community park. There's an opportunity for green or sustainable building here. So all of these things kind of lead into what this building could be, a kind of safe, vibrant, multi-generational community hub. So, and we do this, kind of talk about guiding principles, because we need to go back to those principles as we assess the concepts. And we need to say, are these meeting the things that we talked about when we met together to talk about our vision and our mission? So that's what the guiding principles are doing as we go forward. So if we could move on to the site evaluation, please, and we can go to the next slide. So I imagine many of you have been invested in this project for quite some time, so you do know where the site is, but it's in the kind of South Cambridge, and you can see it's right on the edge of the developed area of Cambridge. So we're surrounded by space that is farmland or being redeveloped. We're connected along Dundas and Branchton, so we're just north of the intersection of Dundas and Branchton. So you can see the blue on your slide is the joint use campus site that we're talking about. Not a lot there right now, and we'll show you some pictures so we can have a look at that for those of you who haven't been to the site recently. So if you could go to the next slide. So what did we see when we had a look at the site? First is that this is in an area that is very much rapidly developing. This is going to be almost a new town. The projected population, once the new residential development is built out, is over 26,000 people within a 15-minute walking distance of this site. And the thing that's really fantastic actually about what the City of Cambridge has been doing and how it services this site is a real dedication to active transportation. So Wesley Street, which is running along the south boundary of the site, will have bike lanes on both sides of the road and a multi-use trail. And the multi-use trail interconnects to a trail system that runs across the city. So we have this really great opportunity to bring people onto the site through a multi-use trail system. Now, our site on the west side is bordered by Moffat Creek. There's advantages and disadvantages. It's really great for a school and cultural and recreation complex to have interaction with the kind of natural surroundings. And so that becomes a really great learning opportunity for the students who will be on the site. To the east side will be the future East Boundary Road, which is a regional road divided down the middle, scheduled for kind of 5 to 10 years. So it's not going to be ready immediately unless there's some acceleration when this complex is ready to go ahead. But one of the impacts of both Moffat Creek and the East Boundary Road is reducing the actual buildable size of the site. So you have approximately 32.5 acres. And out of that 32.5 acres, really only about 26 acres are available for development because we have to respect the wetland and we've had some road allowance for the future East Boundary Road. Now, that does not mean that the site's too small. So, you don't need to worry that your 32 acres has turned into 26 acres. That's part of the feasibility study, is to continue to test the site to ensure that it does actually work. The site also slopes from the southeast corner to the north and to the other side to Moffat Creek. It's a fairly substantial slope, but the concept that we are recommending deals with the slope well because we can make platforms moving across the site. And what you see right now, and actually what you had seen originally on the site, was a fairly dramatic slope. The pre-grading that's already happening on the site is already flattening out that slope somewhat. So the slope is definitely not a challenge related to the development of the site. What you will find is all of our site access is off Wesley Street, with the potential for future access from the East Boundary Road when it's built. So if we could move along to the next slide, please. So just some images in case some of you have been walked at home and haven't had a chance to see what's going on at the site. So this was obviously before the snow. So we went and had a look at the site while they were doing the pre-grading. So the top left is where Faith Street would come into the site, the new Faith Street. Below that is the pre-grading of the site where they're leveling out the site. And the top right is the Wesley Street portion that is already built. And as you get to the bottom right, that is where Wesley Street will extend onto the site with a bridge going over the wetlands and connecting to the site. So it really is actually a lovely site. So, there's no challenge related to the site. We think it provides a lot of opportunity for the joint use complex. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So what are you planning on building? So 4 partners: the City of Cambridge Recreation Complex, the Idea Exchange, the Waterloo Region District School Board, and the Waterloo Catholic District School Board. So the Recreation Complex Council had already approved 104,000 square feet, which includes aquatics, gymnasiums, multi-purpose rooms, a running track, and then the other kind of amenities that support a recreation complex. The Idea Exchange, and it's been such a pleasure working with the Idea Exchange, because the idea about a public library has changed so dramatically and what it offers to the community. So they have a program for 13,600 square feet with spaces that support literacy, have book collections, but have a lot of other interactive spaces, maker spaces, and multi-use spaces that offer programming to the community. Both the Idea Exchange and the Recreation Complex have given us a space program, but we also understand that as you move forward into design development, you would be continuing to assess the program needs and continuing to develop and refine that program going forward. The school boards, on the other hand, when they ask the Ministry of Education for funding for new schools, they tell the ministry how many students they will have, and the ministry has a space template that says, for instance, for the public school board, who will have 519 students projected from JK to grade 8, that they will build 53,000 square feet. And so it's a fairly prescriptive program that they're given. The Waterloo board, public board, is also building a childcare of about 8,500 square feet. The Catholic school is a little bit smaller at 354 students, so just over 42,000 square feet. So that's the basic kind of interior program. If we could go to the next slide, please. Outdoor amenities, which are hugely important to this site, start by including parking and drop-off. So the space program that we were given as part of the RFP for this project was 552 parking spaces. So the school boards gave us their standard number of spaces, the rec complex at 375, and the Idea Exchange at 22 spaces. Talking to all the partners, we understand that the peak demand time is kind of 8 to 9 in the morning. There's a lot of people arriving at the Idea Exchange. There's people arriving for programs at the rec complex, and all the kids are arriving at the school. So this is when you have to make sure that the drop-off and parking work. In addition to the parking that we would have on site, Wesley Street is designed for on-street parking on our side of the road. So we get an additional 40 plus parking spaces on Wesley Street. So we're trying to find the right balance in terms of the number of parking spaces, and we're suggesting no more than 500 spaces on the site, and that should be confirmed as you move forward into design development. You want to right size your parking, you don't want to overbuild it, and you want to recognize that you have a really great trail system coming to the site. And speaking to the regional transit, they plan to extend the number 50 bus route across Wesley Street and down Faith, going right past the site. So it's a very good site in terms of connections to transportation. The school boards need space for 8 full-size buses, and they need drop-off for their special needs buses. Everybody needs a certain amount of pickup and drop off, but the school boards are very much committed to active transportation. So they like childcare and kindergarten park and drop on the site because that's how you deal with the littlest kids. But the drop off for the schools themselves is somewhat limited. And in our conversations with transportation, drop off would be permitted along Wesley Street as well. And then the recreation complex and the Idea Exchange do need convenient drop-off for their seniors, their therapeutic programs, and for barrier-free parking. So that is also located conveniently on the site. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the other part of the outdoor stuff is the more kind of fun stuff, which is the outdoor play and social space. So schools, obviously, we're going to have 800 to 900 students on this site. So they need both hard surface and soft surface play areas. And those are used by the schools during school hours, but like any other community, they are open to the residents and the neighbors after hours and on weekends. The recreation complex is looking for a number of different play activities, both passive and active. Basketball nets out on the site. We are showing the potential for future tennis courts, outdoor classrooms. Everybody's interested in the idea of outdoor classrooms or reading gardens, and so those are available for sharing. And importantly, this will be the site for the neighborhood community park. And so we need to provide green space that is available at all hours to the neighboring community that is not restricted by being part of the schoolyard. If we can move forward, please. So what are all the pieces? We usually start off with a little diagram like this so everybody starts to understand scale. So the red outline is your site boundary, and all of the little boxes are your program. So the public school, the childcare, the Catholic school, the rec complex, the Idea Exchange, all of the parking, the hard surface play, the soft surface play, because these are at the same scale. So we want you to understand what you are trying to put on the site. And the other thing that's interesting about these program components, in each one of those little boxes that represents one of the partners, the light colored box is how much stuff they would like on the ground floor. Because recreation complexes, schools, for instance, gyms, pools, those kinds of facilities prefer to be on the ground floor. So that starts to talk about what the footprint, how much space is going to be taken by the building on the site. So that's just to give you all an idea of scale. So let's move forward to the next slide. Okay, so then we also like to, some people are used to buildings and constructions and space program, and other people would prefer to actually visually see what things look like. So that we need to also see physically, what do certain spaces look like? Some spaces need to be double-story spaces. So gymnasiums, for instance, swimming pools want to be double-story spaces. Others are single spaces, so that we can start to see how things are going to stack up on top of each other when you start to do some concept designs. So that's just taking this space program and breaking out. So you can see the public school board, their classrooms, their gymnasiums, the Catholic school board, the rec complex, and all of those things in the same color. So you can start to see how the pieces all start to go together and how they're going to start to stack onto each other. So that's what that's describing. So if we can move forward, please. So understanding the site and now understanding all the pieces that want to get on the site, we started talking about what can we share? What's our approach to joint use? And so one of the important things is not everything will be shared all the time. Sometimes things are for independent use and control by a partner. Other areas are for structured or scheduled use. So they're, for instance, the school gyms are just for the schools during the school day, but after hours, obviously they're open to the community. And some spaces are common use at all times. So for instance, the community park, common for everybody at all times. So that's the starting point. And then, certainly the steering committee understands this, and we understand this because during the course of our, months together, actually the program changed a few times. So the concept design that we're talking about has to be adaptable. It has to understand that the program that you are thinking about today can be changing over time. And so it has to accommodate that. Also needs to recognize that sometimes there's a little bit of trepidation about joint use and sharing. And so you need to design it so you can grow into the idea of sharing, that it's always there and available, but sometimes you can close it down a little and other times you can open it up. And so that's a big consideration. And it's also quite a big consideration when you go to the next part, the next point, which is about the safety and security needs of the users. So this is elementary school children and childcare with the greater population who will be at the rec complex and the idea exchange. And so you do need to think about safety and security. And you also need to, identify each partner on the site. So the other thing we're thinking about is how you maximize the utilization of space. In a complex like this, we don't want spaces going empty. So we want to really find all the synergies we can with the program components. So you're making the best use of every square foot that you build. So what we came to is that we were asked to study two different approaches to the campus. One which is consolidated, one building on the site, and the other which is separated, two or more buildings on the site. In every case, the idea exchange and the recreation complex are sharing a building. So we looked at 3 consolidated models and 2 different separated models. So we could test what the pros and cons were, what the possibilities were, what really was going to work for this particular partnership, because for a different partnership, the answer would have been quite different. So if we could move forward, please. So what we started talking about was, if it was a consolidated concept, everybody in one building, what could we share? So the rec complex had a space program that asked for 3 full-size gymnasiums And then we also had 2 more gyms on the site, the public school gym and the Catholic school gym. We suggested that there was the potential to just build 2 full-size gyms for the rec complex, increase the size of the public school gym so it was also full-size, and we would have 4 full-size gyms. And this worked because the recreation complex could use 2 gyms during the day, but they really needed 3 gyms in the evenings and weekends. So this is consolidated building, right? In the library learning spaces, the Idea Exchange has learning commons spaces that would be available to the students during the school day, so we could reduce the size of the libraries in the schools. There's a very interesting kind of series of spaces called art, science, technology, maker spaces. And the Idea Exchange has 2 really great rooms, a multi-purpose room and a maker space. And by increasing the size of those, we could actually build 1 less art room and 1 less science room in each one of the schools because they could use those rooms during the day. Everybody has multi-purpose and meeting rooms, so looking for co-locating them and sharing them so that there's a good synergy between those. And in a consolidated building, you would do 1 centrally located mechanical plant, which is very efficient and the best use of resources. So those are some of the joint use opportunities in the consolidated concept. If we could move to the next slide, please. On the site, there's a variety of spaces that sometimes are exclusive use and sometimes can be shared use. So in terms of outdoor play, kindergarten and childcare are always exclusive use. They're fenced and they're secure spaces. But as I said earlier, the playground, the hard surface and the soft surface playground, they're shared between the schools during the day and then open to the community after hours. So all outdoor amenities are fully available to the community after hours. Each partner would have its own designated parking and drop-off area, but there can be time of day sharing. So if there's a big event at the rec complex after hours, they can be using the school's parking lot, for instance. And in a consolidated building, you could have shared garbage and receiving. For the schools themselves, they can reduce their gross floor area and find synergies by sharing 1 administration area, by sharing a gymnasium and stage area, combining their library and having 1 centrally located plant. So you can see there's a variety of different things that can be shared depending on whether it's a consolidated building or a separated concept that you're looking at. Can we move forward, please? So, concept plans. We developed 5 concept plans. Like I said, 3 consolidated and 2 separated. Just want to remind you that these are concept plans. If you're looking at them and you're saying, I don't know why the leisure pool is a rectangle. Leisure pool could be anything in the future. This is testing the program, testing the spaces, testing the relationships. As you move forward into the next phase of the project, there will be a lot of work done and a lot of consultation done on the final development of all of these plans. So these 3 consolidated plans, 1 was a kind of L-shaped building, 1 was a fairly solid block, and 1 was a kind of concept 3 was a linear plan, kind of bounded on the east boundary road. Interestingly, people got pretty excited about concept 3 because they thought it opened up the site really nicely. And so they were excited about the parkland opportunities in concept 3. But as we looked at it in more detail, it was very restrictive in terms of site access. The building was not efficient in terms of its gross floor area or its connections or its connectivity in terms of sharing. So although we were excited about it, as we talked our way through it, it really wasn't making a lot of sense. So if we could move to the next slide, please. And for the separated building concept plans, we did 2 different options. The first was called 1 campus, 2 separate facilities. So the rec complex and the Idea Exchange in 1 building and the 2 schools sharing another building. And then concept 5 was, it actually reflects a little bit what one of your very original site fits was done many years ago that had 3 separate facilities on the site. You can actually see immediately, even from these little diagrams, that it's a lot of building and a lot of parking and not a lot of green space. So as we kind of went through a process of assessing that one came off the table pretty early because it really didn't do the things that we all wanted to do in terms of joint use and sharing. So if we can move forward, please. So what did we do next? Because I'm kind of telling you how we worked together and, how we came to a recommendation. So we put together some assessment criteria that had to do with the site, the building program, the building operations, sustainability, capital and operating costs, and construction implications. So all of the partners went off on their own and did an assessment of each one of the options. My team did an assessment. We all came back together and we worked together through all of our pros and cons, what was working, what wasn't working, how could we start to narrow down what we thought worked well. And as we looked through all of those criteria, 2 preferred concepts emerged, and that was concept 2, which was kind of 1 campus, 1 facility, a block plan, and concept 4, which was 2 separate facilities on the site. So I'm just going to walk you through those in a little bit of detail so you can see what they started to look like. And from that first assessment, we did make some modifications, and so that it would respond to some of the commentary that we all had about what would make it good, what would make it better. So let's move on to the next slide and we'll talk about those concepts. So concept 2 was the 1 facility block plan. So I don't have a pointer, so you're going to have to use your imaginations when I say, what is where. So the rec complex, just so everybody gets a little bit oriented, is in the kind of orange color. The idea exchange is, oh, somebody else has a pointer for me. Thank you. The idea exchange is the mauve color. The school is on the left-hand side. So the childcare is first in the kind of olive green. The public school, because it has the connection to the childcare, is next in the kind of turquoisey color, and the Catholic school in the slightly more blue color. Actually, can you go back to that other slide for a sec, please? So, yep. So what we get is there's a main entrance with a spine from Wesley Street for all the city components. The school boards have an entrance off the playground. It is the most compact footprint of all of the options. The outdoor play areas are quite open, easily monitored and shared by all users. Parking areas are separated. You can see in all of the concepts, the city components are on the east boundary road side. The school components are on the kind of quieter wetland side. We're using the kind of large city parking as a buffer between the east boundary road and the building. So this plan had some positives. You can go to the floor plan next, please. So this is just a blow up of the ground floor plan, and we don't need to go into it in detail, but there's a main street that highlights all of the partners' activities, a courtyard because it's a fairly dense plan, bringing daylight into the plan. You can see on the left-hand side, the school components can operate quite independently, and the circulation for each of the schools is also independent. And then there's these C-shaped wings that enclose the kindergarten plays and bring daylight into those teaching spaces. We'll go to the second floor. We won't spend really any time on the second floor. You can see that multi-purpose rooms, a running track, fitness spaces, and then the school components on the left side. So the upstairs, the second floor, there's no interconnection. All of the interconnection is on the ground floor of this plan. All right, if we can go to the next slide, please. So concept 4 was 1 campus and 2 separate facilities. So you can see 2 separate buildings, the city building on the right side and the school boards on the left side. This will allow the site to be severed if necessary to let the partners move ahead at their own pace. The outdoor play spaces are shared between all the users. There's clearly separated parking and drop off. You can see again that the real benefit actually to this particular layout is the community park in between the 2 buildings, which is accessible to the community and to the neighborhood all the time. And you can see that it actually comes right out to Wesley Boulevard. So you can get into that community boulevard or the community park without crossing the parking. So that was something that was pretty kind of special about this plan. If you can move to the floor plans, please. So you can see the strategy about the rec complex is very similar. There's a main spine where you walk in and you can kind of see all the activities of a place. In the rec complex, the pool is always kind of the jewel that is right up front and center. And then our idea exchange, our members of the steering committee there were saying, please put us right next to the pool. So when people walk into the complex, they're so excited, and then they see us immediately too. So it's very attractive that way. So, and you can see all the pieces that want to be on the ground floor. And you can see in this one, there is a third gym now back in the rec complex because you don't have the school gym quite as accessible for regular use. And then the school is a fairly simple block plan with a kind of shared entrance, everybody with a shared entrance off Wesley. So if we could go to the upper floor plan. And on the upper floor, again, multi-purpose rooms, fitness spaces, running track, and the remainder of the school programs. Okay, we can go forward. So we were also asked to look at whether a twin pad arena could fit on this site. And we were asked to look at Concept 4 specifically to see if you could fit a twin pad arena on the site. And we were also asked then to assess its impact on the site specifically. So what you really can't quite see here is that when you, it's not a matter of just, adding a twin pad arena to that building that was kind of the original concept design. All the buildings on the site have to move to the west to accommodate the additional parking and the footprint of the arenas. Obviously, you're not stacking arenas, so they're taking ground floor space. So it's not quite as simple as just saying, okay, in the future, we'll just plunk this down. You actually have to think about it now because all the buildings have to move to the west. So it does reduce the open space, the green space in the community park, increases the parking by about 100 to 150 spots. So therefore, it kind of increases the traffic on the site. So it does change the nature of the site somewhat. Reduces the amount of green play area for the schools. So we would really need to consider an artificial turf field for the schools because they would completely wear out their grass, their sodded area. It also reduces the space for future additions and portables on the school. So, yes, it can fit, but it does kind of fundamentally change the nature of the site. So if we can move to the next slide, it's showing what the second floor would look like. So I don't think we need to go any further on that. Okay, we can move on. So the next part was to understand what this might cost. And what we're talking about is an order of magnitude cost estimate. So an order of magnitude cost estimate is not a very detailed, it's based on these concept plans. And we're talking about total project cost. So that's what we call hard costs and soft costs. So hard costs are the actual construction, the labor and material to make a building, all the fixed pieces of a building, the site development and the landscaping, the structure, the walls, the exterior walls, the interior walls, all the interior finishes, any cabinet work that is actually fixed, mechanical, electrical, all of the services, and also a general contractor's overhead and profit. Soft costs, on the other hand, are the furniture and loose equipment, consulting fees, permits, studies like geotechnical and surveys that need to be done, legal fees, your internal costs, your construction contingency, your taxes. So what's not included here is escalation. Although you would apply escalation in the neighborhood of 4 to 5% per annum to these costs. COVID impacts are not included here, land purchase, site prep. So an order of magnitude costing at this early level, it's often called a Class D costing. So its level of accuracy is like 15 to 20%. But interestingly, all the concepts came in within about 5% of each other in terms of costing. So cost is not, I think, going to be the determining factor. So if we could move forward to the next slide. So there's some detail here about cost, and certainly you can ask questions later about it, so we won't go into it in detail. But the cost consultant that we use is somebody we use regularly for schools and rec complexes. That they understand what the costs are, so we have a lot of confidence in these total project budgets. So Concept 2 was coming in at a total project budget, so that's soft and hard costs, shared with everybody's costs at about 96 million, and Concept 4 was coming in at about 93 million. The consolidated building, as much as we thought it might come in kind of tighter in terms of cost, actually was hard to get the gross floor areas down because of sometimes having to double up that circulation, the corridors and pieces that connect all the pieces to each other and also keep them separate. So if we could move on to the next slide. So what were our conclusions? Well, the first conclusion, which is clearly the most important one, is that a joint use campus is a great idea for this site and for these partners, and that a shared approach is going to get you all better value for the money. And it's the best utilization of both your indoor and outdoor program spaces. And interestingly, after we kind of went through that original process, the steering committee of assessing all of the options, then we kind of focused down to Concept 2 and Concept 4. And at the outset of the project, we would have all thought that we were going to have a consolidated building, that was the right thing for this site. And as we talked through the reality of operating this site and what it looks like with elementary children and the rest of the community on the site, if it was a high school, the answer may have been different. But these particular partners on this particular site, our recommended or selected approach is the Concept for one campus, two separate facilities. So I'll just walk you through a little bit of why, if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what were the deciding factors? One was capital cost and schedule. You saw that the capital cost was somewhat lower, but when you're talking about that many million, that was not massive. Important for the school boards that the construction of the shared school building can be accelerated. You can both be building at the same time, but elementary school takes less time to build than a rec complex in a library. And an important factor for them is their money is getting stale. So the ministry benchmark does not fund construction cost escalation. So they need to build as quickly as they can so they can get the best value for their dollars. The other interesting thing here is we did manage to get much more efficient floor plans and reduced GFA, which is gross floor area, for all of the partners when we separated the buildings. So that's not just reducing your capital or construction costs, that is reducing your long-term operating costs. We talked about safety and security, and it seemed important that the city functions and the school functions could be independent with scheduled sharing, that there's a very kind of clearly defined outdoor play space for the school kids, but still outdoor space for the rest of the community, which is available at all times. There's a certain amount of complexity to joint use agreements, and you're still going to have them, but the joint use agreements are going to be more straightforward and a little bit simpler in the separated building concepts. And I know the steering committee had a little visit with the Canoe Landing people and talked about the 3 years it took them to put together their joint use agreement. But we also came to the conclusion that we had all talked about a lot of the things that they were still pondering. And during the course of talking about this study, we talked about a lot of those things. So actually, I think as you get into your joint use agreement, you will have lots of good information for moving forward. So if we could move to the next slide. So a couple of quick diagrams that will help you understand some of the kind of deciding factors. That community park, which we think is a fantastic asset, is available to the neighborhood at all hours. And the next one. Very generous, open, easily supervised school playground. And that's important to the schools, but to the community in general, because your community will be playing in those areas as well after hours. Next. It promotes active transportation. You can see the orange dotted line. There's this really great opportunity to interconnect to those multi-use trails. And we're suggesting you can make a trail go through the wetland, kind of outside the fence of the school play area, all the way around the site. So you can circumnavigate the site on the outdoor trails. So for people who would like to take their run outdoors rather than on the indoor track or their walk outdoors, there's such a great opportunity in terms of the multi-use trails and the interconnection to the public transit. You can go to the next one. There's very clearly designated parking and drop off for each partner. It doesn't mean you can't share for certain activities, but it does just keep those school buses and the kids safe and kind of on a different part of the site when they're being dropped off during the school day. Next. Both buildings have a more efficient footprint and lower GFA, so that is reducing your costs, and so that works well for you. The next one. So what really we think is the benefit of Concept 4 is that it's balancing the opportunities for sharing with the other needs for identity, for security, funding limitations, timing limitations. It's a really good balance of getting the most out of a kind of community hub while still respecting the issues that each partner has to deal with on a regular basis. Go to the next one. And definitely the ability to sever the site. Now we've drawn a kind of red line on the site where you might sever it so that both of you can move, the school boards and the city, at your own pace, get your site plan approvals separately. You don't have to sever the site, you can come to an agreement, but this does help you move forward. Where that severance line ends up will happen through the design development process. But this severance line right now is respecting the percentage ratios that each partner would own through your memorandum of understanding. There's still an opportunity to continue to talk about that and develop it. Go to the next slide. So what's next? Negotiation of your agreements. So it's not just the joint use agreement, but there's the development agreement. So your capital cost sharing, how you move forward in terms of the design and construction. There's a series of development approvals. So there's rezoning, site plan approval, a number of things like that. Some of that stuff is going to be fairly more straightforward because the site is already designed, so your stormwater management is completely off-site, but those things need to be done. A design and construction would be next. And so what the schedule starts to look like. The recreation and complex and idea exchange is a slightly more complicated building, swimming pools, all of those things. And also you still have a little bit of work on your space program that you're looking at. So your design and approvals is 18 to 24 months, procurement, 2 to 3 months, construction, at least 2 years. So you're kind of 4 to 5 year timeline, where the schools on their own are about a 3 year timeline. So their design and approvals kind of more straightforward. The procurement is usually pretty tight at about 2 months. And an elementary school takes more like 14 months or so to build as opposed to 2 years. So their timeline is closer to 3 years if you are moving along kind of at your own pace. So that's where you go next. Can we go to the next slide? And what you get. So this is an artist concept. It might not be so glassy, it might be whatever, but what you get is a very inviting community facility. So if we could move to the next slide. So what were we trying to do through this study? What has our team been working together on all this time? It was to test these conceptual designs to help you make a decision on whether this joint use campus is feasible. Is it a good investment of public funds? Does it enhance each one of your vision? Does the community benefit? And certainly in our opinion, the answer is yes to all of those questions. Can we go to the next slide? And so this, I love the little guy at the front giving us the thumbs up, but but this, I mean, this is what you imagine, right? Is your community coming together. It becomes a hub, it becomes a neighborhood. It's just a really great asset for the community. So I think this is the image you should be holding in your heads going forward, is the kind of joy of a community kind of sharing this space. And I think that's all I have. So I will turn it back.
Thank you very much, Maureen, for a very thorough and a good presentation of a very important subject. We've all been really looking forward to seeing what the committees and those of you that have been working hard on this have come up with. And I certainly know that I speak for all of us in thanking you for clearly presenting some of the information. So I'll just remind council at this particular time that we're going to go to our delegates first, then back to Maureen for any questions from council at that time. So we'll move ahead now to go to our 3 delegations that we have registered this evening. So we'll be patient while we have staff bring our first delegation into the meeting, and that'll be Alex Horahane from Active Cambridge. So while our staff is bringing these delegations in, I'll just ask for patience, but they will have 5 minutes to speak to their item. So I'll just get some confirmation once we have that happen.
Mayor McGarry, we have Paul going on first, so I think we'll start with Paul to begin with.
Okay, thank you. I'll introduce him. Not to be outdone, it'll be Paul Langan, and he's coming to us to speak to us about the Scorpions Youth Volleyball Club. And once he joins, then I'll give him just a quick rundown.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mayor McGarry.
Thank you. Paul, can you hear me? It's Mayor Catherine McGarry.
Sure can, Mayor.
It's good to hear your voice again. I'll just introduce you just before you have your 5 minutes. And a reminder that you'll have 5 minutes to address council, and please ensure that your remarks relate directly to the agenda item that's on council this evening. We do have procedural rules at council meetings and ask that you ensure that your remarks are respectful and that you refrain from asking questions of council. So Paul, I'll let you know when your 5 minutes is up, at which time council may have questions for you. I'll help you to guide you through that process. So welcome, Paul, and you've got now 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council there. Yeah, I just wanted to call in to talk about the facility that you're building down there, and to say that our club, as I mentioned in my outline that I mailed in, we are the largest court sport in Cambridge, and we're the second largest sports organization in Cambridge, that we totally support the gym and the 3 courts you're getting there, and that there's opportunities there that I think, you know, it's good for me to point out to you that you can understand. And just to give you 2 examples is tournaments. So currently right now we can't host tournaments. The Ontario Volleyball Association can't host tournaments in Cambridge because we just don't have the gyms. So quite often our teams will travel down to Windsor, and sometimes it's awful. One team will have to travel all the way down to Windsor and they'll face, 6 other teams from this area and 1 team from Windsor because there's no facilities. And when the new Conestoga College came on board, you would have thought that was we thought that would have been a great thing, their new gym and all that. But indeed, these tournaments are getting bumped out because Conestoga wants to use it for their own uses. So there's one example of, we just can't wait for the facility to be built because we can host, the OVA can host tournaments down in the new facility. The second part of it is our club, we're the largest hoster of invitational tournaments in Ontario. So basically, we host our own tournaments too. We've been doing it for like 8 years now, and we're restricted by gyms. So we'll have 2 gyms. You just can't even break even with 2 gyms. So so we've been hosting invitational. So we're looking forward to, as a club, to host other cities, other tournaments to come to the facility too. So that's all I wanted to say. Totally support what you're doing. And, there'll be 2 different sets of tournaments that can be booked into that facility when it's ready, the Ontario Volleyball Association and our own invitationals.
Great, Paul. Thank you very much for your presentation. So I'm going to go next to questions from members of council, and Councillor Liggett is first. Go ahead, Councillor Liggett.
Sorry, my unmute button wasn't working there. Hi, Paul. Nice to hear your voice again. It's been a long time. The plans have 3 volleyball courts in them. Can you tell me, and that's what you would have requested way back, so I'm glad to see that in the plans. When those 3 go in, are you still going to have to use all the other facilities that you've had to use over the last few years? Are you that busy now?
Yeah, and that's not, that's not a, that's a good thing, the fact that we are that size, because during the week, we do have, we have we have a lot of gyms we use in the city, Catholic and public board gyms. Just due to our size, that won't be eliminated. But what the new facility will allow us to do is not to say no to things, not to say no for whatever reason. If the school boards all of a sudden on Saturday say, well, you can't use this gym, I want to run a program, boom, we could run it there. And during the week, hopefully, before 9 when the adults come in, or however you guys organize it, we'll have a choice. But to me, the biggest thing is now there's not the restrictions there was before. Like, we are like a second-class city that we couldn't even put on a tournament. Like, we couldn't, just wasn't the option. If you go to Jacob Hessler, you got to bring the chairs in, you got to put the walls up. It's so rinky-dink, right? So this is probably like book 1 of what we need to have, and I'm so glad we're getting it, Jan.
Okay, follow up, please, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Paul, with the schools, that would be a total of 5 gyms at that location. How does that compare to when they have the provincial volleyball tournaments up in Rim Park? Do they have more than that currently? Like, how will you compare?
Well, they have a lot there. So that's kind of a unique situation up at Rim, because they're literally able to chain the whole thing into courts. So they put the courts over the ice rinks, they put the courts over the field house, and then they, of course, they have the courts in the gym. So there would be 40 courts there at Rim. But if they had it back at Rim, one of the problems with Rim now is that's too small. But the last time at Rim, they were looking for other areas in the region to host it. So you could host certain divisions of certain age groups. So yeah, when it comes back to Rim, that is a good example. Rim's not big enough now. If Waterloo Region wants to hold it, they have to look somewhere else to get people. And so if you're in that game, you'll get some of those divisions there. That's a good question.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I've been there for a few years in a row. It's quite an amazing thing. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Just looking to other members of council for any questions of our delegation. And I don't see any, but I think I'm just going to just clarify with you, Paul, and I really appreciate sort of an overview on this. And certainly sport hosting, tournament hosting for a number of different sports is one of the goals that we want to accomplish in the upgrading of our facilities over the next while, including what will go here. So just to clarify and really building on Councillor Liggett's question. So if we had that hub in this new complex, then you would still be able to host larger tournaments in combining other facilities within the region to help you with the size of tournament, or in other words, provide you greater flexibility in order to attract bigger tournaments. Is that correct?
That's 100% true, and that's exactly what happened last time. Is they went outside and they just went to a couple high schools, and that quite didn't do it. But yeah, because the volleyball has just got so popular that even 40 courts at rim weren't enough. And also, you know, you did touch on the fact that the schools that are attached are going to have nice new gyms. So really, just in your complex, you could now, if you're talking 6 courts, like, well, for sure, I believe the public is having at least double court. I would imagine the Catholic too. So now you're talking about, you know, 7 courts. So you can host huge tournaments, you know, again, not just volleyball, but for sure. I mean, it's great. And you'll have the parking, you'll have everything there. So, yeah, it's a real win. And again, that's not something you see somewhere else. Even RIM doesn't, that's once a year, but nobody hosts like 6 or 7 court tournaments.
Thank you for that information. It's very helpful. So I don't see any other questions coming from members of council. So Paul, again, thank you for coming and delegating at our meeting this afternoon. And you're welcome to watch the remainder of our meeting and on the City of Cambridge YouTube channel, if you so wish. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I just wanted to note in the chat that Maureen has said that just a reminder to council that the Catholic school gym will not be full size. Thank you, Maureen. So we're going to go next back to Alex Hurricane, who is waiting here, I think, from Active Cambridge. So go ahead and bring him in, Madam Clerk. I just wanted to note in the chat that Maureen has said that just a reminder to council that. Hi, Alex. It's Mayor Catherine McGarry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Would you just please turn down your computer, because the YouTube channel is about 25, 30 seconds delay from the actual what's going on.
Yeah, no problem. It's done.
Great, thank you. And just before we get going, I've just got a couple of comments, and it's good for you to join us this evening. So a reminder, Alex, that you'll have 5 minutes to address council, and please ensure that your remarks relate directly to the agenda item that's before council this evening. And as you are well aware, we do have procedural rules at council meetings, and we ask that you ensure that your remarks remain respectful and that you also refrain from asking questions of council. So Alex, I'll let you know when your 5 minutes are up, at which time there may be questions from members of council, and I'll help to guide you through that period of time. So thanks, Alex. Thanks for joining us, and please go ahead.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Mayor McGarry. And Mayor McGarry and council, thank you for the opportunity this evening to talk to you again. There's two files I want to really share with you, and if there's time, I'd like to share 2 other files that will fill in a little bit of background. But I'm here today representing Active Cambridge, and I think most of you know who we are and what we represent. There's about 30 different groups under the Active Cambridge umbrella of sports and fitness groups. Active Cambridge was very active in the original multiplex discussions, and together with councillors at that time, we did visit several sports complexes in the southwestern Ontario area. I also have taken the time over the last year or two to visit complexes in both Alberta and in the UK as I traveled, and talk to the complex managers in each time. There were some very specific themes that came out of the discussions, and at the time, the language that was being used around proposals for the multiplex were clear, I'll say, as far as the facility size. It seems now, and it may be my perception only, that we're not quite as clear in what we're talking about with some of the facilities. So, for instance, I'm talking specifically about the number of lanes in the pools and also the running track itself. So if I get the time, there's some foils behind that I'll expand on those a little bit. But essentially, the message I wanted to leave with you tonight was, could Council please consider having the wordings in the options that we're considering adjusted to reflect the desire for a 10-lane pool and a 4-lane running track. This would ensure that these important points are not lost as we progress forward. I noticed the language now, the great presentation, by the way, tonight on the concepts, but we were using running track, walking track, backwards and forwards. And that leads to a little bit of confusion. And there is a big difference between a running track and a walking track. So if I may, I'm going to quickly go through the 2 points I've just made. First of all, regarding swimming. Swimming is the third most popular sport in Canada. It's very inexpensive and very popular with all ages. It's a great exercise and it's very easy on the body joints, which is very important for older adults. Today, the city of Cambridge only have 8 to 9 indoor lanes, swimming lanes available. Dolson being one of them, and it's very old, in need of regular repair. And I do believe the council is even considering the possibility of closing Dolson down at some time. Given we're looking at 4 or 5 years before we see a new pool, that would cut us down to hardly any lanes available in Cambridge. Should we only keep the new pool small? I'm proposing on behalf of Active Cambridge and our members a 10-lane pool for the new complex, which is where we were in the discussions earlier on. This will ensure that the swimming needs of today and the future are met. Pools can't be expanded once they're built. The cost of 10 lanes today would cost significantly less than having to build a second pool 5 or 10 years down the road when we realize we're out of capacity. And 10 lanes will also position Cambridge very well to host competitions, which was a discussion just now with the volleyball as well. It's a great source of additional revenue, and a 10-lane pool is much more in line with provincial and federal requirements than the traditional 6 or 8-lane pool. That's for the swimming. Running is the other point I want to make. It's grown about 70%. Running popularity has grown about 70% in the last decade. There's a large community of runners in Cambridge, and there's literally nowhere to run in the winter or during inclement weather. One of the least complicated and low-cost ways to keep in shape. You don't have to have a lot of coaching. You put your shoes on, you go out and run. So it's very, very open to anyone actually getting into this exercise. Other complexes, and this is where I mentioned about the fact we visited a lot of complexes, the number one theme that we heard, the most used item within their complexes were the running tracks. They're extremely, extremely popular. The other thing we heard too was running tracks can host walking, walking tracks can't host running. There's different need for consistency of the tracks and so on. So when we use walking tracks, it gets me a little concerned that if we are only considering walking, it's going to limit the use of those tracks tremendously. Installing 4 lanes is the other part of this. It ensures that walkers, slow runners, and fast runners can all coexist. Some of the groups that had put two lanes in and even 3 lanes, they said, you know, there's a mistake. Because now we've got sometimes young mums walking their strollers. We've got older folks just going for a stroll, and we've got runners. And with only 2 lanes that get in each other's way, leads to issues and problems. If you have the 4 lanes, you're able to accommodate everybody. And it's also another good source of revenue, because people will pay, outside groups will pay to come in and use the track for their own training purposes. So that's it. I moved pretty quickly, but I do thank you very much for your time. And I'd like to say once again, it's very exciting to hear what Maureen had to say, because this is finally taking shape, and we're talking some specific time away for what looks to be an excellent new addition to Cambridge.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. And I think we're all pretty pleased to at least be at this stage after so long. So I appreciate your presentation this night. I'm going to just turn to members of council now to see if there's any questions of clarification from our delegation. And I do have one from Councillor Hamilton. Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation, Alex. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you for your involvement in Active Cambridge. It provides a great service to the community. I'm not a competitive swimmer by any means, so I was just wondering if you could fill us in on the difference between competitions and having 8 lanes versus 10 in a pool. Are competitions conducted with 8 lanes? And if so, would they be limited to a specific age group? Or what's really, is it a substantial difference between the two? Or is it just one of aesthetics or size? If you could clarify that, that'd be very helpful. And thank you very much again for your presentation.
You're welcome, and I'm happy to do that. I think there's a lady coming behind me from the Aqua Jets, and she'll probably fill in a bit more. But the 2 big benefits that we see from an Active Cambridge perspective is if you're in any kind of competitive situation, it's quite often the 2 outside lanes are not used. That sounds like a weird thing to say when we're asking for 10 lanes, but in fact the situation is the outside lanes give the inner lanes somewhat of an advantage when they're swimming. So if you've only got 8 lanes, they'd only likely use 6. So there's a big limitation on that. 10 lanes are more in line with what the Swim Canada and so on are looking for, and just gives you that much more flexibility. The other thing I'd say as well is I try to do a lot of lane swimming, and I'll tell you that, and I'm not competitive, I used to be, I'm not anymore, I just swim for the love of it, but you try to go to any of our pools, and you're lucky to be in a lane on your own. Often there's 2 people, sometimes 3 people in a lane trying to swim. And just from a recreational point of view, that's not very conducive to anybody. So there's 2 good reasons why 10 lanes. I mean, does that answer the question?
Thank you. I'll just turn over to Councillor Hamilton. Anything further, Councillor Hamilton?
Oh, that was great. Thank you very much, Alex. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'll next go to Councillor Reid. Councillor Reid, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Alex. And good to see you again today.
That's right.
Yes. I was interested in the running, walking track. You said that they're different. Do you mean that the actual track is different if it's a running track than a walking track? Or that we have to decide to have either one or the other, or we can have both? I was a bit confused with that. So if you could just please explain between the running and walking track, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks very much for allowing me to clarify that. Yep. So essentially, if you look at the YMCA in Cambridge, one of the big concerns about the Y track, it's small, you're tending to run constantly on a turn. It's almost circular. And for runners who are trying to run any distance, that's very, very hard on the ankles. So having good straightaways and then turns is a much better way to go. The other thing is a running track tends to be a little bit more springy, a little bit more absorbent. So again, it's not too hard on runners' ankles and knees and hips. They're not coming down quite as hard. So a running track is conducive to running and walking. A walking track can be limiting to runners. So that's essentially the difference between the 2.
So you would suggest that we put in a running track?
Exactly, and that's why, you know, when I read all the documentation and I see walking track, I'm just a bit concerned that doesn't get stuck, you know, and that doesn't become the words we use, because it should be a walking running track to really encompass the things we learned from these other recreation centers when we went to them.
Thank you very much, Alex.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Our last call. Alex, I don't see any other further questions, and Councillor Reid actually asked mine. So thank you again for joining us this evening and participating in our meeting. You can certainly turn back on the City of Cambridge YouTube channel that I heard in the background to continue watching if you so choose. Thank you again, Alex, for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Mayor McGarry.
So our third delegation this evening is Shelley Fitzpatrick from the Cambridge Aquajet. So we'll just have some patience while staff arranges Shelley to come on as our delegation.
Hello?
Hi, Shelley. It's Mayor Catherine McGarry. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Good. Just give me a couple of minutes to provide a couple of comments, and then I'll let you know when it's okay for you to begin. I just wanted to remind you that you do have 5 minutes in order to address council, and please ensure that your remarks relate directly to the agenda item that's before council this evening. As you're probably well aware, we do have procedural rules here at council meetings, and we ask that you ensure that your remarks remain respectful and you refrain from asking questions of council. I'll let you know when your 5 minutes is up, at which time council members may have questions for you, and I'll help to guide you through that, Shelley. So thank you again for coming, and you've now got 5 minutes. Oh, and I see you have a presentation. So when you are ready for the next slide, just alert our clerk and she will advance the slides as you need to. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here this evening, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak again about the multiplex. I've been on the live meeting throughout the night, and I've really enjoyed the presentations so far. It's so informative and great to see that this is going to be coming to Cambridge and the opportunities that this is going to present. I do see the slideshow up on the screen here. So if we want to go to the first slide, please. I just want to give a little bit of information just on the background of where this has started so far. So since the start of the multiplex study, I think it's been about 5 years or so, the city has either been considering a 50-meter or a 25-meter, but a 10-lane pool. Both of those options have always been 10 lanes. There's a recommendation within the report of going to 8 lanes. It was a very small recommendation somewhere in there for cost savings, and we've noticed this as a club, and it was of pretty big concern. Currently, the city is taking a leading edge, proactive approach in its plans for the 10-lane pool, and I think it would be greatly beneficial if we stuck with that plan of 10 lanes. And tonight, I just wanted to review a couple of the benefits of the 10-lane pool in terms of competitive swimming, recreation swimming, and all of that. So if you can move forward to the next slide on there. The first thing, a 10-lane pool can be used for a variety of different purposes at the same time. When that happens, it results in increased revenue for the city and prime time pool time being shared for different user groups. And I'm going to explain that a little bit further on the next slide. The new pool that's proposed will be the only certified pool in Cambridge once or if Dolson is decommissioned. As W.G. Johnson, the pool in Hespeler is a yards pool, and we can't actually host any sort of competition in this pool. We do train there as part of our training, but for competition purposes, we can't host competitions, like I said, competitions there. The 10-lane pool, with this pool, we're going to be able to host large provincial multi-day swim meets, and it can actually happen in an 8-lane pool. We can still host swim meets in an 8-lane pool, but they can't actually be provincial, huge multi-day meets. In competitive swimming, there's actually what's called a bidding process for hosting these large level meets. And to have the proper facility or a 10-lane pool, we would very likely be looked upon as a very good location, and we would probably get one of those bids to be able to host these meets. If we are able to do that, it would bring in a lot of visitors to the region, which obviously results in many benefits for the larger community. As when I'm talking about these meets, they are multi-day, typical huge provincial swim meets, last on average 3 to 4, maybe even 5 days. With 10 lanes, we'll also have about 25% more capacity, and we do need this to grow as a club. Currently, we don't have enough pool time. We always are in this process of fighting for pool time between, high school swimming, recreational programs. We don't have a lot of pools, and we have to limit our membership currently right now due to the fact. My next slide on there, it just goes into prime time. Actually, I see that up on the screen there. And I wanted to talk about this prime time because it's so important when I'm talking about, splitting the pool up and sharing it amongst different user groups. So prime time for swimming pools, typically I would say would be from about 3 to 8 p.m. on weekdays. And on the weekends, it's usually from around 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. City programmers need these times for lessons, recreational programs, a variety of different programs. That's the most popular times. But at the same time, our competitive swim club and all the competitive swim clubs need this time for training as well. And coming from a high school coach and knowing the high school background as well, we also need that time. And it's really, really, really hard right now to fit all these user groups in at one time. The benefit of a 10-lane pool is that we are actually able to split the pool in half. And a lot of other municipalities with these big pools do this. You can actually practice, you can have competitive swimming going on while recreation programming is going on at the same time. And the 10-lane pool will allow for that to happen all at the same time. The city could bring in double the revenue from renting to recreational groups and as well as swim clubs at the same time in the same pool. If you move forward to the next slide, it does show a visual of a 10-lane pool. When we talk about a 10-lane pool, though, it is a square 25 by 25 meter pool. So it's actually square pool. And FINA standards mean that we need 2.5 meters per lane. That's what makes a 25 by 25 meter pool there. And like I said, it can be split up, and that's the benefit of it because multiple user groups can use it. If we keep going to the last slide, I kind of talk a little bit about financials the second last slide. Just a couple points on those financials. Within the current feasibility report, there is a projection of, some costs of what the recreational complex would be. The current costs actually are projected for the 10-lane pool. So that is currently what is being talked about, and the current costs do include that. But there is a slight recommendation within the report that if the city wants to save a little bit of money, consider an 8-lane pool. And that was the whole idea of the presentation is it's so important that we kind of stick with the original plan of the 10-lane pool. And it just one of my slides go into the cost savings on there. There will be, in the long run, more revenue coming in because of these prime time hours and being able to share that with multiple groups. And we'll be able to benefit from that, especially the larger swim meets and what that will bring in as well. My last slide, just as a couple takeaways on there. We are supportive. I have looked through the study many times, a lot of us on the board, and we really do love the option number 4. I love all the options actually, but number 4, we do concur that this will allow the city to build the best possible facility. We have a few concerns about the, concept design, but nothing to be addressed right now. We would really like to be included in the final design phase. And just, continue the partnership that is in place, that we can have a little bit of say in that final design phase of what would be required for competitive swimming as well. And just to finish off, we do highly recommend that you stick with that 10-lane pool. It's looking awesome, what I see so far. It's innovative, leading edge, and I really do, I want to maximize the benefits for all people involved, and I really think that that 10-lane pool will really do that. That's all for this presentation portion of it.
Well, thank you, Shelley, for a very thorough presentation this evening. And I have to say that I'm pretty sure we all are pretty excited to see this move ahead. We also recognize the incredible value of sport hosting. and are really looking forward to a facility that will not only bring visitors to our city, but also to accommodate the needs of the Cambridge Aquajets and future swimmers. And I did want to add my thanks for all that you do in order to promote the sport in our city. I'll move next to questions from council. I've got Councillor Liggett followed by Councillor Adshade. So Councillor Liggett, you're up. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Shelley, I don't know if you noticed, but in concept 4, there aren't any bleachers for the pool. And I know when you have meets and even with swim classes, those bleachers are pretty necessary. So do you have concerns about that, or did you notice that?
Yeah, we noticed that for sure. That was one of my points at the end is we were hoping to, be included in that design phase at the end. We noticed that there are what we thought were bleachers, but not overlooking the pool itself, which was a pretty big concern. But we were just, we weren't really concerned. We are definitely concerned about that, but the biggest concern right now is still sticking with the 10-lane pool. That's why we really want to, little things like that is why we want to be involved, because yes, that's definitely going to be a concern with the final design phase. I know the Cambridge Aquajets has submitted to the city a report. We actually hired a consultant from RecTech. They're an aquatic consultant, just with all of the recommendations that we would put forth. If they were going to build the 10-lane pool, these are the things that we would recommend. And the city does have that report. We did hire the company for that. And so consulting just us further in that process, that was the biggest concern though that we did see so far with that, with the design for sure.
Okay, so to iterate, you want the bleachers and the 10 lanes of pools. 10 lanes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I kind of hoped Councillor Liggett wasn't saying 10 pools. That's probably beyond the scope of today, but 10 lanes, certainly we understand that. Thank you. I'll go next to Councillor Adshade and then Councillor Hamilton's after that. Go ahead, Councillor Adshade.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Shelley, thanks for your presentation. I really understood when you said 10-lane pool would help us share the facility and bring in more revenue. But I'm still wondering if you can provide some information regarding why it's so much for competitive swim meets and for out-of-town for tournaments, why it's so important to have a 10-lane pool compared to an 8-lane pool.
Yep. So in competitive swimming, there's those two seasons that we've always talked about, the short course season, the long course season. So the short course season is all swimmers that swim in the 25-meter pool versus a 50-meter pool. And there are very few 25-meter pools around that have 10 lanes. So what happens is the more lanes that we have in the pool, the larger the meets that we can have, and we can actually apply for those, what I would say, provincial qualifying meets. And when submitting an application for those meets with a 10-lane pool, the likelihood is extremely high that we would be granted, to host those meets, because there are very, very few and far facilities that could actually do that. You need the space, you need those lanes, and it's really, really important in competitive swimming for sure to have those.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. Okay.
No problem.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, and then Councillor Reid. Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Shelley, for your presentation. That was excellent. I guess I'm going to echo Councillor Liggett and Councillor Adshade with their concerns and questions. And then I was just wondering, I guess I have 3 questions for you. The first would be on one of these larger provincial events, can you just ballpark the number of spectators that might be involved? Would we have 20 people in the stands, 200 or 2,000?
No, we're looking at 2. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. This makes it easier.
Yeah, no. So for the provincial level meets, an example would be going to regional, like a regional provincial level meet. We would go as a club, and when you go as a club, we're talking when we just talk about swimmers, we're talking about hundreds of swimmers. When I say hundreds of swimmers, there's usually about at least 50 to 100 clubs at these meets. They bring their swimmers, and then when you go, I've never been to one where I've been able to even get in and get seating unless you go ahead of time. We're talking about thousands of spectators and people within the buildings. And the way it works for these meets is they're all age groups as well, and all different swims and all different days. So for a large level meet, which we would be able to host a few of these meets, I'm talking whether they're invitational, just local meets, provincial meets, we'd be hosting a variety of different meets. And they all kind of over the place, but a typical meet, an invitational meet where we, get a couple clubs coming to the region. When I say a couple, I'm thinking around 10. Even those meets, you're bringing in a couple hundred people locally. But for the big provincial level meets, we're looking at a minimum of typically 3 days. And over those 3 days, the pool constantly booked out for different age groups and different people. So you have a variety of different people coming in and out each day. And we're talking about, yes, like over 1,000 people for sure.
Thank you. I guess my follow-up question would be, well, kind of two questions, but where is the nearest 10-lane pool? Is there one in the region? Do you have to drive to Windsor or Toronto? So who would be coming to Cambridge if we had one of those pools? And where do you go for these competitions as well when you have to have them with the Aquajets?
Yeah.
And I'll stop there.
So for those meets, you were right with there. We are either going to Toronto or we're going to Windsor. Those are really the only two options in between for those meets. And they're usually the ones London, Windsor, Toronto, Markham. Those are the areas that have big enough pools to host these meets. Even for our invitational, when I say invitational, throughout the year, you go to the practice meets or but Toronto and Windsor are really the two big, really the only ones that I've been to in my years of competitive swimming that are able to host them. So to have something locally for all the clubs, and I know the Guelph clubs, the Kitchener, all the local clubs around, it wouldn't be just Cambridge Aquajets that would want those pool spaces and probably want to book out the facility for those. You would have local clubs also looking to, if this type of facility was available, to use that. So we would be talking about, and I always say the Cambridge Aquajets, but all those other local clubs, and I think there's at least 5 or 6 local clubs that would look at wanting to book out a 10-lane pool. So you would have a revenue from them as well.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Shelley. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. Good information. I'll go next to Councillor Reid, followed by Councillor Leggett. Go ahead, Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Hamilton asked one of my questions, but it also prompted another question in my mind. And I'm wondering if we have big meets and they're there for 3 days, what does that do to the regular programming for our citizens here in Cambridge if the pool is taken up for a meet?
Mm-hmm. So, and other pools that I have seen, and I also think of that, that was the idea of having the separate leisure pool as well. So I know some programming can happen in those times, but at the same time, I've been to meets where they block off still periods of time where, say it's in between competition, that happens. So if it was a Saturday and it was your more senior swimmers swimming, they would have, a morning session and then a late afternoon session. But if they're with a big pool like this in larger space or even a leisure pool, you can have time frames within the day where it's not fully booked for swimming, for competition. So I don't know the details of it everywhere, but I have seen that for large, like a provincial level competition, you would only probably have, I'm going to say, a provincial meet or a big regional meet like that only a couple per year. But for invitational meets, there'd be a lot more of those type of meets, and definitely that could be worked around, where you split up time, split up days, leave a morning open for programming, and maybe on the Friday night, the Saturday night, and then like maybe the Sunday are different times when the competition actually takes place, because it's over different time periods, not just you book for 3 days and no one else can use that space in those 3 days.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. And I would note too, Shelley, that some of our questions, I think, about sport hosting and the numbers coming in are sort of a general question, not just associated with the Cambridge Aquajets, but I think part of what council's looking forward to is, just kind of the economic benefits and the ability to sort of showcase not only this facility, but Cambridge in general.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah,
sorry. Yep, can I speak to that for that? So I do have a swimmer, a competitive swimmer. I have a 14-year-old daughter and I have a 7-year-old daughter who's just getting into the swimming. So I kind of see both sides of it, as well as I see the high school swimming side of it too. And with my competitive older swimmer, we do travel to these types of meets quite often. And when we travel, I would say we're traveling to just with the Cambridge Aquajets, 8 to 10 meets a year, usually in, Windsor, other areas. I would say stay over meets, though, 4 to 5 times for sure in a season. And it's a whole weekend event. Like I know going down, and every competitive swimmer knows, when we go to a big invitational or regional level meet, we're going down for the experience. We enjoy the city. I know my daughter and I go to Windsor, and every year we go down for 4 straight days. We stay down there, even if she's only swimming 1 or 2 events. We take advantage of everything that the city has to offer, and we stay down and make like a whole evening of it. And weekend. And every swimmer and family that I know does the same thing. We're not traveling. If they go into the pool for warm up, then they might swim 1 30-second swim hours later. So you have to stay locally and do things locally, even though you might not be swimming the whole time. And that's kind of the fun part about swimming, is you get to socialize and do all those things as well. And it's a whole community.
Yeah, certainly it is. And I've heard that from just so many of the other groups that have been weighing in on assisting us with planning this big facility. And I really appreciate that. I'm going to go to Councillor Liggett, followed by Councillor Devine, and then we'll move to staff. Go ahead, Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Shelley, my question had to do along the same lines, because my business mind starts whirling, and I think about the advantages to this type of facility and all of the different meets. And I know I have mentioned that I've been to the volleyball tournaments at the provincials up in at RIM a few years in a row. And I know that our hotels here are booked solid, because there's just not enough hotels in the region for these types of tournaments. Now, you said over 3 days, over 1,000 people. That I realize that's not anywhere near the quantity for the volleyball tournaments, but can you tell me, have you taken a look at what our hotel facilities are, the number of rooms in Cambridge, and whether you see that there would be a need for more hotels, in particular towards the southern part of Cambridge? Would that be an advantage for some hotel chain to look at opening up a hotel in the southern part, or even in another part of the city?
Yeah, so I've lived in the city for a long time. I actually lived in Branchdon, so right where you're about to build, and now I live just a few minutes down the road in Clyde, right about the opposite way. And I love South Cambridge, but yes, the nice thing about Cambridge is it's so close to Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, even Guelph, that area, that people are traveling our way. There are many opportunities, like it's not just one city with confined hotels. You can, if you are willing to travel within like that 25 minutes, there are plenty of options to be able to find accommodations. But yes, we would benefit definitely in South Cambridge for having a hotel. Like I know that there's nothing like that within South Cambridge, so you kind of have to go out to Highway 24, or you have to go out that way a little more. It's not far from the area that we're talking about. But yeah, I do see the benefit of possibility down the road. As you know, the first couple of years, you see so many competitions, whether it's swimming, volleyball, all these things taking place, and the amount of people coming in. I could see the benefit of hotels, you know, popping up in the area a little closer to these facilities and things like that within South Cambridge.
Thank you. And I know that we are in close contact with our Waterloo Region Tourism Corporation, and that's been part of the study over the last few years, and the focus in order to ensure that we have good facilities for sport hosting. And they do keep track of sort of the inventory of rooms and how they're used in different sport hosting events here. I'll go next to Councillor Devine. Councillor Devine.
Shelley, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you very much for your knowledge on the subject. Many of my questions have been answered and asked by previous councillors. However, when you travel, it sounds like the bulk of your meets that you go to are in around the GTA and Windsor. Is that correct?
Yep. So Windsor, we do a couple invitationals in London, and then we're traveling to Toronto and Markham for, yes. And a lot of the times that is because there are 50-meter pools there. But yes, those are the general areas, nothing locally within Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, Guelph. Brantford does host some of the meets, yes.
So the question is, what are the size of these pools? You just mentioned a 50-meter pool because you've been kind of cutting out a little bit. What are the sizes of these pools that host these meets?
Majority of the pools are 50-meter, 8 or 10 lane pools.
8 or 10. Nothing larger than 10 lanes?
I'm not sure if the largest one is. No, I don't think anything larger than 10. Okay. I don't want to be quoted on that, but no, I don't think. I think 10 lanes is the standard. Like, I know for competitive swimming, to host these meets, 10 lanes is the standard. And when talking about with our consultant about this, he always says that, you know, if you're talking about European pools, places in the US, they always start with the 10 lane standard pool, and then they go up from there. Whereas we around here always start with smaller pools and start talking about that. So 10 lane definitely is the standard pool for those size meets.
Okay, thank you.
It's a max 10, yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. And I see no further questions, Shelley. So I wanted to thank you again for joining our meeting. You're welcome to watch the remainder of our meeting on the City of Cambridge YouTube channel if you so wish. But thank you again for your delegation tonight.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time to hear me out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now we'll open it up just ahead of putting the item on the floor. So we'll go to questions for staff or for Maureen O'Shaughnessy, our architect, prior to, again, putting it on the floor. So if you've got questions of staff or Maureen at this point. We've got a couple. We'll start with Councillor Devine, followed by Councillor Mann. Go ahead, Councillor Devine.
Thank you, through the chair. This is directed to staff and Maureen, whoever prefer to answer it. Over the last number of years since I've been in council, which is 6 years now, and each and every councillor has had to deal with issues in around schools as it relates to parking, pickup, drop off, etc., etc., etc. Now, my question is there going to be on-site drop off and pick up for both these schools and not drop off and pick up on the street? That is my first question, because the school boards have a responsibility here, in my opinion, and I'd like to see them live up to that responsibility as it relates to pick up and drop off.
I'll start the answer to that question, Councillor.
Thank you.
The school boards working with the region and the municipalities are actually very committed to active transportation. That does not mean that on a rainy day, not everybody jumps in their car and drives like 2 blocks and drops their children off. So we're very aware of the challenges of the drop-off issue at schools. So as the plan develops, there will be more work going into it. But right now, the drop-off for the schools is kind of, the design has more than one opportunity for drop-off. The road profile for Wesley has parking along the north side in front of the rec complex and in front of the school. In our conversations with your transportation people, that parking area can be signed during the mornings and the afternoons for on-street pickup and drop off that gets the cars right out of the driving lanes. We have also shown designated park and drop on within the parking area for the childcare and the kindergartens, because they actually get out of the car and they walk their children into the door or into the playground. The designs right now do also show some additional drop off within the site, but we know that the school boards are working very hard with their communities to try to limit the amount of drop off. And you, as we kind of pointed out in the presentation, you have such good connections to sidewalks and multi-use trails that you should be able to, somewhat mitigate the issues of parking and drop off on the school site. It's one of the reasons why we very clearly also separated the parking and drop off for the rec complex and library from the school, so that they could have their separate driveways and separate access, and the school buses are also completely separated. So as you go into design development, you'd be working in more detail with the traffic consultant, but those things have definitely all been considered in the concept designs that you're looking at.
Okay, can I respond to that, Mayor McGarry?
You may go ahead.
Thank you. Maureen, thanks for your response. I don't quite agree with your response. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, we live with issues on our streets, in around the schools, with drop-off and pickup. And I believe that the boards themselves have a responsibility to the residents of this community to have on-site drop-off and pickup. Because we go to, we're at a point now we can design it properly, and to be quite honest with you, the last number of schools that have been designed, they have gotten somewhat better, but we still have the same problems. And I think there needs to be drop-off and pickup sites at the schools and not on the streets. Because what we get is then the residents. I mean, there's going to be a big residential area there. The residents start complaining. It goes on and on and on. And I believe that the boards have a responsibility that up until now, I don't believe they've been living up to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Mann, followed by Councillor Leggett. Go ahead, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. And just before I get into my question for Maureen, I just want to pick up on what Councillor Devine was talking about. And for those of us who know where GCI is, Galt Collegiate Institute has a great pickup for students, because you go into the drive, you go down the street, make a turn into their driveway, and it's on their property where students are loaded and unloaded for school. And there is absolutely no problem there, because the driveway is so long and it's in a circular fashion. So kids are not out on the street. Nobody's interfering with traffic, and people who need to be picked up by parents can be picked up there. And it's a great setup. And I'm sure it was never intended for that at the time, but it's evolved into that. And it's a great way to make sure that students are safe and drivers remain safe as well. And it looks like there could be something like that at this option 4 location. Maybe not to the same degree as GCI, but certainly something like that would be very beneficial. So I'll just leave it at that, because my question is a little different than Councillor Devine's, and it deals with funding. And I think, Maureen, when you said to us that the school board money is identified today, and it's based on a formula based on the number of students that are anticipated to be attending at the school whenever that's built. And that funding is identified today, regardless of when the build is. The money, that value of the dollar stays the same as today. So my question is this, I think if I read this correctly, the city's portion of the build would be about $65 million. And if we don't build for another 2 or 3 years, or we don't start to build for another 2 or 3 years, what does that $64 million really become? Because we're building a facility that is valued at 64 million today, but with inflation and COVID construction impacts and those kinds of things, are we looking at something far greater than $64 million?
Yeah, if I can address that, that's in construction terms called escalation, and the escalation is not included in the costing that you have in front of you, the order of magnitude costing you have in front of you. Our cost consultants are recommending that you carry an allowance of approximately 4 to 5% of the construction cost per annum to the middle of the construction period is the way you usually apply escalation. So yeah, you would need to apply that. Right now, the construction markets are pretty volatile because of COVID and because of the previous negotiations that we had with the states in terms of trade. Construction markets have been quite volatile. So as that calms down, the pricing may level out a little bit. But yes, you should be putting aside an allowance for escalation until kind of middle of construction period is when you usually do it too.
Thank you. And just to follow up, Madam Chair. So I'm sorry, but I look at that and I think 4% sounds kind of conservative when in today's environment. And I just wonder if it should be more than that, or if you feel that 4% going forward would be a reasonable rate.
We're relying on an independent cost consultant who we have worked with for many years on projects of this kind of magnitude. And their recommendation is between 4 and 5%. We used to carry 2 to 3% per annum. So this is higher than what we had been carrying in the past, 5 to 10 years. So that has gone up. Also, I think what I said earlier in talking about an order of magnitude construction estimate, this is based on, as you can see, concept diagrams and engineering design briefs. So there's already a fair bit of flexibility within the cost there. And as you move through the design development, the market will become more clear over the kind of year or 2 years that you're going through design development. You'll be looking very carefully at your space program, your gross floor area, your kind of selection of materials and all of those things to control your costs. So it's really a kind of ongoing process. But the short answer to your escalation question is yes, I believe it's adequate.
Thanks, Maureen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll go next to Councillor Liggett, followed by Councillor Reid. Go ahead, Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to iterate, I don't think we can be emphatic enough about the parking and the drop-off. We all see it in all of our wards, at all of our schools. It's a major complaint. And when you're working with elementary schools, it's not just dropping a kid off and them jumping out of the car. We're talking about having to get the child, put the child in the car, strap them in. So there's a longer time needed in which to do these, especially if you have newborns or kids that can't even walk that you're also dealing with at the same time. So, I agree that the needs components of the school, the dollars for that, they need to take responsibility for this, because we all pay money to the school board, to the province, to the school board for their facilities, and we're already paying for this. So I don't think city taxpayers should have to pay on top of what we're already paying there. I also think that, the school board thinking active transportation is enough. That's not realistic. It's really not realistic. And they need to be thinking, realistically, as I've said. So another comment that I want to make is the pricing for this. I don't want to get into sticker shock later on. I think that's maybe what Councillor Mann was thinking about when he asked the question about the dollars. Every time we do some sort of a government project, the costing ends up on the moon. I mean, some of them, we've had some that have doubled in the millions of dollars. And I know, being in the industry, that governments are looked at as you know, this great unicorn dancing around. But you know, anybody that works on the construction of it, they think, oh well, I'm going to bid this much, but I'm going to put this much in for overage, and then they come back with a price later on saying, well, you know, it ended up costing more than I thought, but they already have the contract, and we never ever go back to them and say, I'm sorry, but you bid on this, and this is what you're going to do it for. That doesn't happen. So I don't want to get into sticker shock later on, and I'm sure I represent 100% of the taxpayers here. So at this, and the other thing is the bleachers. I want to make sure that the bleachers are there. I see that the option that is the one that is most beneficial doesn't show the bleachers. And I know you've said that it's not, we haven't filled out the full design here yet. So I'm assuming that those bleachers will be part of it, as well as the 10 lanes. And that's all I have to comment on. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go next to Councillor Reid. Go ahead.
Thank you to Maureen. It kind of builds on what Councillor Liggett was saying, and I know we're into the design development, but how much can you tell us? I'm not even sure you can, but if you can tell us at this point, if we as a council decided that we wanted the 10 lanes, we wanted the bleachers, and we wanted the 4-lane running walking track, how much would that add to the cost?
Councillor Reid, I can't tell you exactly what that would add to the cost, but I'll tell you the thinking that went into what we're showing in the concept drawings. And as you know, as both of you have noted, these are concept drawings, and there is definitely more program review and program development to happen as we go forward. One of the things that was challenging about putting this together and putting the concept designs together is that council had already approved a gross floor area of 104,020 square feet for the complex. And so you have a lot of program that you are trying to squeeze into that gross floor area. When we first met with your steering committee, we brought that up immediately, that your space program, in our view, had a lot of net area, a lot of program spaces that you were trying to achieve, but did not have a very good allowance for all of the other spaces that support those areas, all the corridors, the circulation spaces, the mechanical spaces. And so you'll have to work very carefully on a space program that prioritizes those important things and make decisions about those things. So for instance, 300 seats of bleachers for the swimming pool is 4,000 square feet. 4,000 square feet is almost half of one of those gyms. We're showing on the drawing right now a 10-lane pool. So that actually was costed, was a 10-lane pool, and that was shown on the drawings. We're also showing on the drawings right now a 4-lane track. So that also was costed as a 4-lane track. But I think you'll need to make some decisions about your space program, about balancing the program, about whether you need to stick to that 104,000 square feet as your benchmark for area, whether you're willing to increase your area a little bit to accommodate some of these things. So really it is the next phase. I think those things will fit on the site. Those things can be accommodated in the kind of conceptual plan. There will definitely be some cost premiums, because every time you add square footage, you add cost. So you either give something up or you add a little bit of square footage. So does that help, Councillor Reid?
It does help a great deal. I thought it would be something like that, but it does help us when we're going to have to decide what it is we actually do want in there. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move next to Councillor Hamilton, followed by Councillor Adjei. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. just to echo Councillor Devine, Councillor Liggett, and Councillor Mann, a neighboring this facility in Ward 7 on Myers Road is Holy Spirit and Moffat Creek schools. And one of the biggest issues I've heard about since I started my role as councillor has been the incredible difficulties of parking, pickup, and drop off for these schools. And I know GCI may have evolved into something that worked out. Myers Road, Moffat Creek, and Holy Spirit evolved into, just the technical term would be a gong show. Really. And only now, because of tremendous work, I think, from the region, from the city, from parents, is that being untangled. But the number one thing that every single group and actor has said is, I wish we could go back in time and do this over again and do it right. So I cannot stress enough how much I support Councillor Devine and Councillor Liggett, and how much I support making sure that we almost overextend how much parking we have and how much access we have for a kiss and ride and a pick up and drop off. And I'm an environmentalist, but if we have to lose a little bit of green space so that parents have more space to pick up their kids and drop off their kids for school, I'm all in favor. I'm a big fan of active transportation myself. A lot of parents in Ward 7 I know are, but every single parent across the board has said, if it's -20 and there are snow squalls, I'm not sending my 6-year-old out on the sidewalk. I'm going to get into my car and I'm going to drop them off. And that will happen here with the 27,000 people that we see going into the region. So if we can get movement, talking with the school boards, the city, the region on that, I would say we have to nail it right now, because we're only going to get one opportunity. And I see the complexities of Moffat Creek and Holy Spirit, and we have to avoid that at all costs. So with that, I guess I do have two questions. One of them directly related to parking, and I'm not sure if you or any of the city staff could answer it, but what are the road crossings on Wesley Boulevard going to be as well? Because we're going to have a lot of students, parents coming down those boulevards, if those are indeed houses, which I think they're slated to be. What are the tiers, the type of pedestrian crossings? Will they be the tier 2 with flashing lights? Will there have to be a crossing guard out there? Will there be a pedestrian island? These are a lot of the questions I think we have to consider for obviously not just the property itself, but the houses adjacent to it. And the other, and this might just be, I guess, a bit of a lighter question, but I see a space for future tennis courts. And I'm just wondering what factors or variables would allow those future tennis courts to sooner rather than later become actual tennis courts. Because I've heard a lot of residents also say, we have no courts. We have to go pretty far for that. So those are my two comments for now. But thank you very much again for your presentation so far.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton, I'll start the answer to the question, and then if somebody from the city wants to weigh in. I don't know the nature of all of the crossings, but I do know that the multi-use trail crossing, which enters the site at the west side, close to the bridge from Wesley, from the existing community, is one of those kind of raised, protected crossings as part of the multi-use trail. I'm not clear on the nature of the crossing at Faith Street, which is our main intersection. So the city might be able to give you some feedback on that. And just a little bit about mitigating drop-off. One of the things that the school boards are working on together, which will help the number of students and spread the drop-off out, is that they will be staggering their bell times. So we are definitely not having all 800 or 900 kids coming and going at the same time. So as the design progresses, there will be a transportation consultant as part of the design as you move into design, and they will talk about the traffic impacts, but the school boards have already said that they would stagger their bell times, which will definitely help. Regarding the tennis courts, I think I'll turn that over to the city staff to answer you on that one.
Thank you. And I'll turn to Mr. Shaw. Go ahead, Mr. Shaw.
So as we progress on detailed design for the rec facility and nail down our indoor amenities, we can initiate the design for outdoor amenities in the remaining spaces. And that would, at that point, the school boards would also have advanced their design. And so at that point, we know what green spaces we have available and then what outdoor amenities we can incorporate in there. So we will have a community consultation and identify what outdoor amenities we need and then initiate construction of that. So currently we do have a project for outdoor amenities in 2026, I believe, but that can be certainly advanced as we progress into detailed design.
Thank you. And may I just have a quick follow-up question, Your Worship?
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I apologize if I missed this during the presentation, but one of the issues I know at some of the schools on Myers Road is there are limited numbers of entrances, so a bottleneck can be created during those bell times. So I was just wondering where or how many and where the entrances to the shared space for the schools are going to be located. If there will be one main entrance with a small side, or 3 or 4 with one main, 3 or 4 side entrances, or I think that will also go a great deal. It'll be a great help towards eliminating a lot of the bottleneck effects that cause that congestion with pickup drop-off.
Yeah, I can address that question. Of course, these things will be worked out more in design development, but in the design that the concept design that's put forward, the kindergarten kids get dropped off to the kindy playgrounds. The childcare kids get dropped off directly to the childcare playground, so they're all separate spaces. And then the elementary kids, for those of you who have children that age right now, they go directly into the playground. They don't go into a main school entrance when they're being dropped off. They go into the playground and wait for the bell and then come into the school. And so there are multiple entrances from the playground into the school. And there will be multiple ways to get into the playground from the site. So a playground is always fenced for the kind of safety and security of the kids, so the runners don't escape and so the balls don't escape. But there's always those gaps in the fence where the kids can get in, and you would be creating gaps in the fence at all potential access points on the site. So in Concept 4, for instance, you can create a gap in the fence connected to where the community park is, so kids can get in there, connected to the back of the rec complex, and connected to the side of the school. So you can have gaps in the fence all the way across the various entrances across Wesley. So that will help distribute the kids across the site. And I think that's one of the benefits of this site.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Adshade, followed by Councillor Liggett. Go ahead, Councillor Adshade.
Thank you. Thanks, Your Worship. Just a comment I wanted to make is that all along, this has been a very lengthy process. And when we first started this discussion, there was always, we were always looking towards a 10 lane pool and a 4-lane running track, actually. That's something I think is really important. I really think this is something, if we have to increase the square footage, so be it. And like bleachers is another important factor. I think this is something we only have a chance to do this right. And all along we heard very clearly tonight, and all along we've heard since the beginning of this discussion how important a 10-lane pool is and a 4-lane running track. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think that's something that's very important.
Thank you. We'll go next to Councillor Liggett, followed by Councillor Devine. Councillor Liggett, go ahead.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I have 2 questions. So one for Maureen and then one for Yogesh, most likely. Maureen, by the way, I love the layout of the feasibility study. It was very easy to comprehend. The diagrams were great. So thank you very, very much. When we are talking about square footage and the need for looking for places where it can go, I know sometimes buildings are done, architects and designers have this great idea of having all this empty space, and I know it looks good, but sometimes it's not good for the needs and combining the needs with that square footage. And so I'm wondering if when you've done the library space, do you have a lot of open space there, or is it mostly taken up with the facility needs?
When you're talking, are you talking, sorry, specifically about the Idea Exchange library space?
Yes, because I would assume for the rec place, the meets would require more space for larger groups of people. So yeah, so the library we looked at that.
Yeah, the Idea Exchange has a very compact space program that they worked actually quite hard on during the course of the study to tighten it up and consult among themselves so that they were right sizing it. They were looking at other branches, how other branches were being used, and they refined their program as we went through. And because the Idea Exchange and the Rec Complex are sharing space, they do actually, their circulation space, their corridor spaces are much more efficient because there's not a separate corridor going into the Idea Exchange. It's using the same main entrance and the same main kind of spine circulation space as the Rec Complex. So I would say that they were very aware of being efficient about their space and it's not oversized. The layout, the interior layout wasn't done for them because we tested it generally and understood that it would work to meet their needs and that they really didn't have extra space that they were building to. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you.
So the question for Mr. Shaw is, based on the comments about the tennis court, it just brought to mind the tennis courts that are at Glenview. There were, if I'm not sure if they're even active today, but I know for at least 15 years they weren't being used because we weren't keeping them up. So are they still inactive? Are they not being used? I'm wondering why we would build new outdoor tennis courts if these other ones that have been sitting, being run down for years are just sitting there. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are active today and fixed.
I'll have to get back on that question, Councillor Lickett.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor Devine. Go ahead, Councillor Devine.
Thank you very much, and through the chair. On concept 4, and Councillor Leggett just spoke about it, there's a potential of 3 tennis courts there. We have in the city of Cambridge no indoor tennis. The tennis clubs in the area have been very, very active in trying to get indoor tennis within our city. So much so that the Tennis Canada a couple of years ago came to the city and was willing to give the city a bubble at no cost. And now the players have all changed on the city side in the rec department. I think the tennis clubs were prepared to look after it, run it, et cetera, I'm just kind of thinking, I know it's not on the table and this is kind of a red herring I'm kind of throwing out here at this point. Question is, should we be maybe getting a hold of the tennis clubs and seeing if we can do something with indoor tennis on that site? Is more of a question than anything.
I'm not sure if that's my question to answer, but certainly my experience of tennis bubbles is the space that we've allocated for the 3 outdoor courts would not be adequate for a tennis bubble. It needs more space than what we've shown.
That's correct. But this bubble, my understanding is the bubble does do 3 courts. Is my understanding. But yes, clearly because of the shape of the bubble and the curvature, yes, it takes up more space. Absolutely, Maureen.
Yeah.
Okay. But I know sorry.
I was going to turn to Mr. Shaw once you're done there.
Sure.
I think we need to be mindful of how much indoor amenities we can put on the same site. And that's where the challenges are. We need to keep some green space and outdoor space. If we have more and more indoor amenities at the same site, it may not be the best use of the land there. So there may be another locations we can look at it at future to have the opportunities for indoor tennis.
Well, I think Leslie just raised her eyebrow there. So now that she knows about it, maybe we could maybe have a look at it in the future. Because again, all most of the players have changed with the city staff.
Yeah, and Councillor Devine, the interesting thing about the outdoor space that's allocated to tennis is just having a hard surface play allows more basketball. You can be multi-purpose about it. Also allows pickleball. So which is becoming more and more popular. So just designating a zone for hard surface play gives you some flexibility in the future.
Oh, it certainly does. But you can also play pickleball inside a tennis dome as well. Okay, thank you.
For sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking around just to see if there's that last sneaky question that might come in. And seeing none, I did want to say that any of my questions have already been asked by my colleagues. And I did want to take this opportunity again, just before we put the motion on the floor, to not only thank the delegations that came tonight, but really a lot of the different user groups and individuals over the years that have come forward to suggest what is needed in their organization, but what our residents would like to see on the site. And we'd certainly like to do it all, but we do have to make some decisions here. And I think that I just would like again to thank our staff, our consultants, Maureen, and all those that have contributed to this evening's discussion, and just thank everybody for their engagement on this very important project. So with that, I do believe that we're ready for the motion at this point, and I am going to ask Councillor Wolf to put the motion on the floor. Please read it in its entirety.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Devine. Recommendation: the Council received the report 21-038 CD, Cambridge Joint Use Campus Feasibility Study, Appendix A, summarizing the feasibility of developing and operating a joint use campus with the Cambridge Public Library, Waterloo Region District School Board, and Waterloo Catholic District School Board, and that Council endorse the recommendation from CS&P Architects to proceed with the concept for one campus, two separate facilities at the joint use campus. The city facility to include, and here I've added, a 10-lane, 25-meter swimming pool, gymnasiums, and change fitness to running track, multi-purpose rooms, and a branch of Idea Exchange, Cambridge Public Library. And that Council directs staff to commence with a detailed design of a joint use campus, working with the Idea Exchange, Cambridge Public Library, Waterloo Region District School Board, and Waterloo Catholic District School Board. And that public engagement be recognized as a critical component of the project. And further, that Council directs staff to enter into discussions with the Waterloo Region District School Board and Waterloo Catholic District School Board to develop joint use campus operating agreements to the satisfaction of the city solicitor. Speaking to the motion.
If you could just wait one more second, I'll get you to speak next. But I actually forgot to thank our school partners and Idea Exchange, and my vast thanking of everybody, and recognizing that our school boards, the Idea Exchange, have been a pleasure to work for, and we really look forward to a solid partnership and their vision for this site as well. Speaking to the motion, go ahead, Councillor Wolf.
Okay, thank you. I guess I've been a bit quiet tonight, but I was conscious of the time, and I'm now 20 minutes late for MHAC. So I'm very excited that we have all these partners that came together, and they're going to create a safe, vibrant, multi-generation community hub. As a member of the Idea Exchange board, wanted to let you know that the board is very excited about the design, and we're looking forward to the fact that this is a joint facility. We would normally, in a library or Idea Exchange of this size, expect 135 visits per year. With this facility, we're expecting 150,000 visits per year. So again, I'm extremely excited about the design, the possibilities, all the connections that are happening here. We know it's going to be an economic benefit. It was good to hear about all the tournaments that we can hold, and the fact that as a teacher, I can concur that parking is a problem, but schools that have a kiss and ride system work. So basically you need that loop. You actually need the teachers to open the door, take the kid out, or put the kid in. And they are very efficient if there is that loop mechanism. So I'll be looking for that on the design. And basically that's all. Thanks. And
Thank
I may
you.
duck out of this meeting after I vote.
After you vote, okay. Any further comments from members of council? Councillor Mann, go ahead. You're just so much better when we can actually hear you. I'm gonna charge a fee, I think, for anybody who doesn't unmute. Go ahead.
It was probably better when I was on mute. I have to agree with what Councillor Wolf has said. When you look at a development of this magnitude coming together with the various partners, the school board, the school boards, the city, sorry, Pam, but it's the library. When we have all these partners come together and we can come up with an idea that is going to look after the children of today and the children of tomorrow and leaders of tomorrow, I think it's a great opportunity to really invest in the future of our community. But I do have to say that I'm a little concerned about the cost, because we identified a $64 million cost from the city of Cambridge. And I think when we look at the escalation cost between now and construction, you look at another $10 million that could be applied to this. And as Councillor Liggett identified, you have to be concerned about the sticker shock. And so that's the only concern I have, that I'm very pessimistic when it comes to $64 million being the cost that the city is going to have to look at. And I think we better be prepared for it to be more than $64 million. And we better be prepared to determine how we are going to finance that, because it is going to be a big hit to the city. And it's something that we need to be aware of. And as we move forward with this initiative, it's something we have to be cognizant of, because we're going to have to explain it to the public. So I'll just leave it at that for now. I will support the motion. I think it's a good initiative for the future of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. See, you were worth hearing. Councillor Hamilton next. We're all worth hearing. Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. As councillor of Ward 7, where this recreation complex will be constructed, to share in all the comments of councillors that have spoken before me in terms of being excited to build something that will help structure the youth, every age bracket of our city, not just in 5 years, but for generations to come. It's a very rare opportunity, and it's great that, again, all the actors measured twice and cut once in this. And I know it's been a long, complex process, and different avenues have been looked at, different locations, different facilities, different numbers of buildings. But it's really boiled down to something that I think has been as cost effective as could be given the circumstance, and something that I think everyone can get behind. There's a little bit of something for everyone in this. There's a lot of intersecting parts, a lot of different actors, and I think it's a testament to what happens in Cambridge when people are positive and work together towards a shared goal. And it's not just looking towards the past. The past is very important, but this is something that is really orienting the city towards the future. And I think it's going to set the bar, not just for rec complexes in Ontario and for Canada, but also for other projects that Cambridge can engage as a city and as a community going forth. So I just want to tip my hat and say hats off to everyone that's been involved in this very long process throughout the years. I know a lot has been undertaken and we've still got a lot to go, a lot of distance to cover. There's a lot more to go, but I'm very excited for the direction this is tending towards, and I just want to give my thanks and appreciation to everyone who's invested their time and effort into this. I think it's really shaping up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mehta next, followed by Councillor Adshade. Councillor Mehta.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very excited about this project for many of the reasons that were stated. I believe it's very innovative, and I love partnerships. I'm glad we're going down that route, and I am glad that the buildings are separate while still being on the same site, because I did have some concerns about them being in the same building, but I'm glad that we've looking at making those changes. And you know, this is a project that its time has come, and the community has been waiting a long time. And I think it's great that we're investing in recreation, and it really does bring people together. And this is something that our community does need. The cost, of course, is going to be a concern, and that's something that we're going to have to continue to work through, as Councillor Mann had stated. And it might mean too, throughout the process, we may have to expand the partnerships and look at other options in addition. But I am comfortable with where we are right now and where we're going, and there'll still be plenty of public feedback on the way. So this motion's got my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adshade, go ahead.
Thanks, Your Worship. And I just wanted to say I'm very excited about this project as well. I think the concept for with the two separate buildings is, I think it's excellent. I've really well thought out, well done. I'm very excited about it. I don't think we could ask for much better than what we got. And I also wanted to say I'm very happy to see this motion's been revised to include a 4-lane running track and a 10-meter pool, because that's something that we talked about for a long time. We only got one chance to do this right, so let's make it right. So I'm very pleased with that revised motion. I'm in full support of this motion.
Thank you. And I would imagine that you meant not a 10-meter pool, but a 10-lane pool. Good catch.
Yes, did I say that? Yeah, a 10-lane pool, not a 10-meter pool. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Clarification.
Okay.
Accepted.
Okay.
All right, Councillor Devine next. Go ahead, Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you to the chair. I think this is a win-win situation. I mean, there's, clearly there's some massaging to be done in various areas, but it's a win-win situation with that part of the city, with the schools, the recreation center, the pools, the gyms, and the library, or if we insist, we can call it the idea exchange. But I think no, it's a win-win situation. But it's going to be some massaging, like Councillor Mann had pointed out. Costing, sticker shock. We have to be very, very careful, and we have to really watch the pennies on this, because with COVID, it would appear that certainly a number of things that escalated, building materials, etc., trouble getting skilled labor. But I'm very supportive of this project, but it's going to be a while before we get there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I really just echo everyone's comments tonight. And again, this is kind of a moment we've been waiting for. I'm just ecstatic about the partnerships that we are building, looking forward to working together with all our partnerships in the future. And certainly we don't take the costs lightly. However, this is where we've been doing some sustained advocacy, both at the provincial and the federal levels, to look for other funding sources for our new rec complex. And it's just for purposes of people that are watching at home, we're unable to actually apply for funding from these upper levels of government until we get to this design stage. So I have been adding in all of the to all of our pre-budget consultations with our area MPPs and MPs, as well as the pre-budget consultation that I did with the Minister of Finance of Ontario last week, and letting them know that we will be putting forward submission for funding for our new Cambridge Recreation Complex. And I will be meeting as well in a pre-budget consultation tomorrow with our area MPs, and we'll be bringing that to them as well. So we will hope to be successful with other other funding programs. I know that our staff watch this all the time, and any opportunity that we have for new infrastructure money, in particular that's looking to fund new recreation complexes, is certainly money that we will be advocating for once we're further along. With that being said, congratulations everybody to get to this point. And again, my thanks to all of staff and our various partners who has gotten to this level. We are now ready for the vote. Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
Very much in favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Unanimously. That's good news. Thank you. Before we move on to the next item of business, is there any other business to discuss?
I just have to leave.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, you have the meeting. So thank you, Councillor Wolf.
Okay.
Go ahead to your MHAC meeting.
Thank you.
We don't have any motions. We don't have any notice of motions. We'll move forward now to the confirmatory bylaw. And I believe that Councillor Adshade, you have this motion. Will you please read it in its entirety? Councillor Adshade.
I do, Your Worship. Thank you. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Mann. The confirmatory bylaw being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge.
Thank you. And we'll now call for the vote. Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Hamilton.
Favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
That carries.
Thank you. And now we'll reach the close of the meeting. I think it's Councillor Mehta. I think you have the motion for our close of meeting today. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I do. This motion is moved by myself. I did have Councillor Wolf as a seconder, so I will need a seconder because like she left. So it's that the council meeting is now adjourned at 7:36 p.m.
Thank you. And I'll look for a seconder of that.
I'll
Vote
second.
against it if I dare. If you dare, Councillor Hamilton, I saw your hand first. All right. So Madam Clerk, I'll ask for the vote.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Well, thank you. That does conclude our meeting for today. Thank you all for joining us. And as Cambridge and Waterloo Region is heading into the red zone now, remember to stay safe and look after each other and stay home as much as possible. And certainly the last thing I wanted to say is be kind to everyone. Thanks for joining us. Good night.